many years before the wedding, that would turn her world upside down. Blessing had already discovered that marrying the man you love doesn't just mean gaining a husband. It means inheriting a whole family's opinions about who you should be. She had grown up in a small village in Cross River, raised by a grandmother who taught her that a woman's hands in the garden could either bring life or let it wither away. So she learned from her grandmother how to coax tomatoes from stubborn soil until they grew fat and red like Christmas ornament, how to plant pepper seeds in perfect rows that would yield enough fire to last through 3 seasons, and how to speak to plants in the gentle way that made even the most difficult crops flourish under her touch. When she married David and moved to his family compound in Calabar, she brought these gifts with her, hoping every green thing she grew would be proof of the blessing she wanted to be to his family. But David's mother, Mama Rose, was not a woman who welcomed change easily. She had sharp eyes that could spot a weed from across the compound and an even sharper tongue that could wither confidence faster than drought kills crops. From the moment Blessing arrived with her small bag of seeds and farming tools, Mama Rose decided she was too different, too quiet, and worst of all, practicing something that wasn't natural. The first time Blessing noticed the hostility was when she planted a small vegetable garden behind the house. Within 2 weeks, the tomatoes were already showing tiny green fruits, while the peppers were sprouting with unusual vigor. Instead of being impressed, Mama Rose stood at her kitchen window, arms folded, watching with suspicion. "This is not normal," she announced to anyone who would listen. "Plants don't grow like this unless someone is using dark powers. That girl is doing something to make these things grow so fast. It's witchcraft." From that day forward, the whispers began spreading through the compound like wildfire during Harmattan season. At family gatherings, church meetings, even casual neighbor visits, Mama Rose would find ways to mention Blessing's unnatural gardening success. "You see how everything she touches grows too well?" she would say, shaking her head dramatically. "Normal farming doesn't work like that. She's using jazz to make these plants grow, and who knows what kind of spirits she's bringing into our compound." Blessing tried at first to explain her techniques, the special way her grandmother had taught her to prepare soil, the timing of planting during certain moon phases, the natural fertilizers she made from kitchen scrap. But Mama Rose would wave away these explanations. "That's what they always say," she would respond coldly. "They make it sound like normal farming, but I know witchcraft when I see it. No decent Christian woman should have powers like this." The accusations cut deeper than any farming tool. Blessing had learned her skills from a grandmother who prayed over every seed before planting, who saw gardening as a way to partner with God in creating life. To have these gifts labeled as evil felt like having her very soul misunderstood. Over time, other family members began to echo Mama Rose's suspicions. Cousins would avoid the vegetables from Blessing's garden during family meals. Neighbors would make the sign of the cross when they walked past her thriving plants. Children were warned not to play near her garden area. Blessing started to doubt herself. Maybe her success really was unusual. Maybe there was something wrong with her methods. Some nights, she would lie awake, wondering if she should stop gardening altogether to keep peace in the family. But something deep inside her knew that her gifts were meant to nourish, not harm. David, caught between his wife and his mother, often remained silent during these accusations, which hurt Blessing more than the words themselves. She began to feel like a stranger in her own marriage, present but not truly welcomed or understood. The rainy season came and went, then the dry season, and still the whispers followed Blessing like shadows. She continued gardening quietly, but now she did it almost in secret, tending her plants early in the morning before others woke up, harvesting quickly and storing her produce out of sight. Mama Rose's campaign against her intensified. She would tell church members that having a witch in the family was bringing bad luck to their household. She would claim that Blessing's unnatural farming was disturbing the spiritual balance of their land. "Mark my words," Mama Rose would say ominously, "this kind of dark power always brings consequences. One day, we will all pay for allowing this witchcraft in our midst." Then came the news that would change everything. David's younger sister, Joy, was getting married in 3 months, and the family wanted to host the most spectacular wedding Calabar had ever seen. They had dreams of a celebration that would be talked about for years, a reception with hundreds of guests, live music, and most importantly, a feast that would showcase their family's prosperity and hospitality. But there was one enormous problem. The rains had failed that year. What started as a delayed rainy season had turned into a devastating drought that was affecting the entire region. Crops were dying, food prices were skyrocketing, and farmers were watching helplessly as their livelihoods withered in the fields. The local markets that usually overflowed with fresh vegetables, fruits, and grains were now displaying mostly imported goods at prices the family couldn't afford. Fresh tomatoes cost more than meat. Peppers were scarce and expensive. Even basic ingredients for traditional soups were becoming luxury items. How can we feed 300 people when food is this expensive? David's father asked during an emergency family meeting. The caterers are asking for double their original price because ingredients are so costly now. Mama Rose, who had been planning this wedding for years, was beside herself. This is supposed to be our moment to show the whole community what our family can do. If we serve poor food, or worse, if we have to reduce the guest list because we can't afford to feed everyone, the shame will follow us forever. Various family members suggested different solutions. Some said they should postpone the wedding until the next season when food prices might come down. Others proposed having a smaller, simpler celebration. A few suggested taking loans to cover the increased catering costs. "We could borrow money from the bank," one uncle suggested. "Or ask the extended family to contribute more," another aunt added. But none of these solutions felt right. The wedding date had already been announced, invitations sent, and guests had made travel arrangements. The family's reputation was at stake. That's when David's father almost desperately looked around the room and said, "Isn't there anyone who can help us grow what we need for the wedding feast?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew that Blessing had the only thriving garden in the entire area, but no one wanted to be the first to suggest asking the woman Mama Rose had labeled a witch. Finally, David's youngest brother, who had always been fond of the fresh vegetables from Blessing's garden, spoke up quietly. "What about Sister Blessing? Her garden is still producing plenty of food." Mama Rose's face hardened immediately. "We are not using anything from that witch's garden for my daughter's wedding. I don't care if we serve bread and water. We will not allow dark forces to contaminate Joy's special day." But David's father was a practical man facing an impossible situation. "Rose," he said carefully, "maybe we should consider all our options." "No." Mama Rose stood up dramatically. "I have told you people, that girl is using witchcraft to make those plants grow. Do you want to curse Joy's marriage by serving food grown with dark powers?" The argument that followed was intense. Some family members sided with Mama Rose, saying it was better to struggle with expensive ingredients than risk spiritual contamination. Others pointed out that they were running out of alternatives. Meanwhile, Blessing sat quietly in the corner, saying nothing but feeling the weight of everyone's stares. She knew her garden could easily provide enough fresh vegetables to feed the entire wedding reception. Her tomatoes were heavy and perfect. Her peppers were abundant. Her leafy greens were lush despite the drought conditions. But she also knew that offering her help would be seen as confirmation of Mama Rose's accusations. If she admitted her garden was still thriving when everyone else's had failed, it would seem to prove that she was indeed using supernatural means. The meeting ended without resolution, but the next morning brought a new crisis. The catering company called to inform them that due to the food shortage, they would have to cancel the contract unless the family could somehow provide their own fresh ingredients. The dried and imported substitutes they had suggested would not create the kind of traditional feast the family had promised their guests. David's father called another emergency meeting. This time, the desperation was visible on everyone's face. "We have 2 days to figure this out," he announced grimly. "Otherwise, we will have to tell 300 guests that there will be no proper wedding reception." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Joy herself, the bride who had been quiet through all the previous discussions, spoke up with tears in her eyes. "Papa, I don't care about having a big feast. I just want to get married without bringing shame to our family name." It was then that Blessing, moved by the young woman's distress, made a decision that would change everything. "I can help," she said quietly. The room turned to look at her. Mama Rose's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could speak, Blessing continued. "My garden can provide enough fresh vegetables for the entire reception. Tomatoes, peppers, onions, leafy greens, everything the caterers need to prepare traditional dishes. I'm offering this as my wedding gift to Joy." The silence that followed was profound. David's father looked hopeful for the first time in days. Joy's eyes filled with gratitude, but Mama Rose was furious. "We will not," she began, but David's father raised his hand to stop her. "Rose, our daughter's happiness is more important than our pride. If Blessing can save this wedding, we need to let her." What followed was the most intense 48 hours the family had ever experienced. Blessing worked from dawn to dusk, harvesting the most beautiful vegetables her garden had ever produced. Her tomatoes were perfectly ripe and unblemished. Her peppers were vibrant and flavorful. Her leafy greens were so fresh they still sparkled with morning dew. The caterers, who had been preparing to disappoint yet another family, were amazed when they saw the quality and quantity of fresh produce Blessing had provided. "These vegetables are restaurant quality," the head chef told David's father. "Actually, they're better than restaurant quality. With ingredients like these, we can create a feast that will be remembered for years." On the morning of the wedding, the aroma of perfectly seasoned dishes began filling the air around the reception venue. The caterers had outdone themselves, creating traditional soups with rich, complex flavors that only came from the freshest ingredient. The jollof rice was perfectly balanced, the pepper soup had exactly the right amount of heat, and the vegetable sides were so colorful they looked like artwork on the plates. But the real drama was still to come. As guests began arriving and taking their seats, word spread about how delicious everything smelled. People who had attended dozens of weddings were commenting that they had never experienced such mouth-watering aromas at a reception before. Mama Rose, dressed in her finest lace and trying to look dignified despite her inner turmoil, greeted guests with forced smiles. She had spent the morning telling herself that no matter how good the food tasted, she would find a way to minimize Blessing's contribution. When the MC called everyone to attention for the blessing of the meal, Mama Rose expected a simple prayer and quick transition to eating. What she didn't expect was what happened next. The head caterer approached the microphone with a huge smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, "before we bless this incredible feast, I need to tell you a story about a miracle that happened in this family's backyard." The guests leaned forward with interest. Mama Rose felt a knot forming in her stomach. 2 days ago, we thought we would have to cancel this reception because the drought has made fresh ingredients impossible to find. But then someone in this family stepped forward with the most beautiful vegetables I have ever seen in 30 years of catering. He paused dramatically, and the guests murmured with curiosity. Everything you are about to eat, every perfectly ripe tomato, every flavorful pepper, every fresh green leaf came from a garden that somehow flourished while every other farm in the region was failing. Mama Rose felt her face growing hot. Around the reception area, guests were looking at each other with amazement and whispering about who could have performed such a feat. The caterer continued, "The woman who grew these miracle vegetables didn't ask for recognition or payment. She simply said she wanted to bless this wedding with the fruits of her labor. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in acknowledging the woman whose generous heart and skilled hands made this feast possible, our very own Blessing." The applause that erupted was thunderous. Guests rose to their feet, craning their necks to see Blessing, who sat frozen in surprise at the family table. Joy, the bride, was crying with happiness and gratitude. David beamed with pride as he stood to embrace his wife. But all eyes eventually turned to Mama Rose, whose face had gone through several shades of red and was now settling into a pale, stunned expression. The caterer wasn't finished. "I have to tell you," he said with genuine amazement, "in all my years of cooking, I have never worked with vegetables of this quality. They were so fresh, so perfectly grown, so full of natural flavor that they made my job easy. Whatever technique this woman uses, it's pure magic, the kind of magic that comes from having blessed hands and a pure heart. The word blessed hung in the air like a benediction. Here was a professional chef standing before hundreds of witnesses, declaring that Blessing's gardening was not witchcraft, but pure blessing. As guests began to eat, their reactions confirmed everything the caterer had said. The food was exceptional beyond words. People who had attended countless weddings were declaring this the best reception meal they had ever tasted. The vegetables added layers of flavor to every dish that made even simple preparations taste extraordinary. Table by table, guests began asking who had provided such incredible ingredients. When they learned it was the quiet young woman at the family table, the same woman some had heard whispered about as having unusual gardening methods, their respect and admiration grew even more. An elderly woman who was known throughout Calabar for her own farming expertise made her way to Blessing's table. "My daughter," she said warmly, "I have been growing food for 50 years, and I have never seen vegetables like what you provided today. You don't just have skill, you have a gift from God. Anyone who calls this witchcraft doesn't understand the difference between blessing and curse." One by one, other guests approached Blessing with similar sentiments. They wanted to know her techniques, her secrets, her methods. They spoke of her blessed hands and pure heart. They asked if she could teach their daughters and help their own struggling gardens. Mama Rose sat at the head table, watching this parade of praise with growing mortification. Every compliment directed at Blessing fell like a public rebuke of her accusations. Every guest who spoke of Blessing and God's gift made her claims of witchcraft seem more foolish. The breaking point came when the local pastor, who had officiated the wedding ceremony, approached their table. "Sister Rose," he said kindly but firmly, "I need to speak with you about something important." He gestured toward Blessing, who was graciously accepting congratulations from yet another group of admiring guests. "I have watched that young woman in our church for months now. I have seen her pray over her garden every morning. I have watched her share her produce freely with families in need. I have observed her humble spirit and generous heart." He paused meaningfully. "What I see in her is not witchcraft, Sister Rose. What I see is the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Her garden flourishes because she has been blessed by God to be a blessing to others." The pastor's words carried weight that no caterer's praise or guest's admiration could match. This was their spiritual leader speaking publicly about the true nature of Blessing's gifts. Mama Rose's last defenses crumbled. Sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of Blessing's pure heart and generous spirit, watching 300 guests celebrate food grown by hands she had called evil, she finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. The reception continued with joy and laughter, but Mama Rose felt increasingly isolated in her shame. Every bite of delicious food reminded her of the accusations she had made. Every guest, who praised Blessing's contribution, highlighted her own failure to recognize goodness when it lived in her own house. Late that evening, as the celebration was winding down and guests were offering their final compliments to the family, Mama Rose found herself alone with Blessing for the first time in months. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Mama Rose spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong about you." Blessing, ever gracious, simply nodded. "Mama, we all make mistakes when we don't understand something." "But I did more than misunderstand," Mama Rose continued, tears now flowing freely. "I called evil what was good. I accused you of darkness when you were bringing light. I almost prevented my own daughter from receiving the blessing you wanted to give." She paused, struggling with words that had been building in her heart all evening. "Can you forgive a foolish old woman who was too proud to see the truth?" Blessing's response came from the same pure heart that had motivated her to save the wedding despite months of persecution. "Mama, there's nothing to forgive. From now on, let's just focus on growing good things together." The reconciliation that followed transformed not just their relationship, but the entire family dynamic. Word of Mama Rose's apology and Blessing's gracious forgiveness spread through their community, becoming its own kind of blessing that touched everyone who heard it. In the months that followed, Blessing became the most sought-after gardening teacher in Calabar. People who had once whispered about her unusual methods now begged her to share her knowledge. Her techniques, rooted in wisdom passed down from her grandmother and blessed by her own pure intentions, helped dozens of families establish thriving gardens even in difficult conditions. Thanks for watching my video, and please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and also share and comment, and the most important thing, subscribe. See you soon.